Hello, I'm Fiona Peart. I'm going to paint a picture of a gondolier in watercolour. I've already drawn up the painting and I'm going to begin by wetting the paper. Now it's very important that you wet the paper thoroughly. I'm using a nice big 1-inch brush for this and I'm pushing the water into the paper. You can see how wet this needs to be. It's very important because when I start to put the colours on, I want the colours to run and I want them to have plenty of time to dry. Now, as the paper absorbs the water, it's going to bow from the board. The paper I'm using is Bockingford 140 pound. I'll just take off the excess moisture. And once I've taken that excess moisture off, I can now tape the paper at the bottom. So I'll just pull that straight and tape it to my board. Okay, and then we'll start. Now I'm going to begin with Naples yellow. This is a lovely yellow, a lovely creamy yellow. I'm going to start with this in the centre of my picture. I'm using pans. I like to use pans. You could use tubes if you wanted to, but I prefer the pans. And the paint has to be a good full colour, so not too wishy-washy, because of course the paper is wet already. Now using a little bit of permanent rose, and you can see this is a really bright, vibrant colour. So you don't need a lot of it. You don't want it too wet. And you don't want it too bright. You're going to take that from the top and drag it into the yellow, and then starting right down from the bottom of the painting. Now we need a little bit more pink, but very little because it is very strong. So always put the colour back onto the palette. So take the pink, push it into the paper. This is why it had to be wet enough. Up into the yellow, a little bit more pink. And you can gauge it as you go along. This is what's so nice about watercolour. You can kind of see what's happening on the paper, and the more you wet the paper like this, the more control you have. So just backwards and forwards, nice and gentle. And when you think, yeah, that's about it, then just wait. And I'm just going to give it a second or two, and then we're going to put some blue in. Now the blue I'm using is Winsor Blue Green Shade. It's important that we use green shade because it's got a hint of green in it. Now this is also a very powerful colour, but when I mix it with the pink, it's going to turn into a mauve. So when we start to put it on, you'll see it looks quite blue, but as we work it up into the pink, it'll give us this nice soft mauve. There it comes. You're just blending the colours on the paper, and then start at the top, and again, exactly the same. Don't bring it too far down, just into the pink. You don't want it to go into the yellow, just into the pink. Looking at that, we could probably take it up a little bit more. So you can adjust it. You've got plenty of time if you've wet the paper enough. If you haven't wet the paper enough and it's started to dry, that's when you're in trouble. So it must be wet enough. And that's it. We're going to now leave that to dry. That's all nice and dry now, so we can now put the headland in. We're going to start with, again, the Winsor Blue Green shade and a little of the pink. You're going to aim to make a colour similar to the sky colour, this lovely mauve. So mix the two colours together, and then when you put it on, you want it to be slightly bluer. Now, as we put this on the paper, I'm going to introduce another colour. You want it more blue. Remember, it's in the distance. You don't want it to be too green at this stage. We'll drop in a little bit of yellow. You want to keep a nice horizontal line because this is going to be your horizon, the water. Don't worry about going over the post. Now there's a building here, which I'm going to drop in a little colour in there in a moment. Then we've got some more buildings, so into the Naples yellow, just a little. That will just change that, and into a little bit of the Naples yellow and drop that in there. As we come further forward, we've then got a little lighthouse here. We want to leave some little spaces, leave some gaps. Now, this is coming forward a little bit. There's the roof line. At this point, I'm going to drop in a little bit of burnt sienna. So I'm changing the colours as I go. If you think of it as like a little mini wash, in other words, this whole area, just going to let the colours wash together in the area that I'm letting them mix on the paper. So this is your little wash, this area. Now, you don't have to worry here about this being too level, because this is a harbour and there's a little bit of permanent rose going in, so you get kind of a hint of different colours. Just drop in your colours. So this is your wet in wet wash. This doesn't have to be too level because it's kind of a harbour. Then we're going to just kind of imply that there's some buildings or something in the background. If you can't make it out, don't make it up. So there's a little bit more that nice blue. Then we want some foliage. So at this point, all I'm going to do is put a little bit of the Naples yellow with the blue. So it's looking a bit green, so mix a bit of that with the pink. So it's a kind of a hint of green. You want it sludgy green. You don't really want it to look too green. That'll bring it forward too much. And again, I'm just going to put a few little blobs really, just to give the impression of foliage. Remember, this is in the background. Let that run into the roof line. You do want it just to kind of merge in. Just use the point of the brush, and then we'll just put maybe a few of those little masts in with the point. Okay, and that's our background done. So now I'm going to change to the flat brush, and I'm going to start with water. So it doesn't matter, you don't have to wait for that to dry. We can use the Winsor blue-green shade straight into that, little bit of the permanent rose. So we're making the lovely kind of blue, this mauve blue colour. Now, if it looks a little bit bright, all you're going to do is put the tiny amount of the yellow in it, just to tone it down slightly. So you're basically using those three primaries. There's your blue. Dip it into the water, just so it's just the right consistency. This mustn't be too strong, it mustn't be too dark. And I'm going to not paint where the yellow is, but start to come about here with the brush flat. So I'm just going to imply little strokes. So it's tap, 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 tap and drag. Keep the brush level, because remember, water is horizontal. Don't have it at a slope like this, otherwise it'll never look like water. Ignore the little chap, just go round him. That's it. Continue down the page to about a little bit further down. A few more strokes. Keep the colour quite soft. Now, if you want to avoid the boat, it's a great tip. This is very, very simple. You're just going to tear a piece of paper, it's just the ordinary watercolour paper, place the paper onto the boat where you don't want this colour to go through, and then you're just going to go straight over the top like that. And like magic, it looks like it goes behind. So don't avoid it, just a couple of little marks there. Okay, and then I think we can move on to a bigger brush. Maybe just don't fiddle. So back to using the round brush. This is a nice size 12, nice big point. Now we want the impression here of lots of deeper water, so bigger strokes. So if we start on the left-hand side, hardly touch the paper and then press and then lift. Now if we do a couple of these strokes just to kind of get the feel of it, the less you press, the thinner the strokes. We'll just interlock some of the strokes. When you come up to the boat, put your little mask on it and then just take it straight over. So ignore the fact that the boat's there. That will then form an edge. Now the important thing with watercolour is you could go over the top and you could lift it, or you can work up to an edge. And because this is a lovely clean shape, that's what we're going to do. So just do a few more big strokes here. Then we'll start with some strokes at this side. So again, you use that as a mask there, protect the boat, straight over the top. Now we're going to put some strokes on top of these. These are our first kind of base strokes. We'll put some darker ones on. Nice bigger strokes in the front. We want to block in this area. Now if I just drag the brush, I'll get a nice dry brush. That will give us a little bit of movement in the front of the picture. And then back to here, a few strokes here. And then a few dry strokes. Now I want a couple of dry strokes going up to the boat. So just press and then just take that up to there. You want to keep some of the pink because the pink is going to look like the light reflected from the sky, so we want to keep that. So I'm going to mix a little bit more colour now. So it's exactly the same, the Winsor blue green. This is a really vibrant colour, it's a fabulous colour. With the permanent rose, it gives you almost like a French ultramarine colour. But don't forget, if you want to tone it down, if I put a little bit of burnt sienna, you can see how this now changes, rather than the Naples yellow. So if I put a little of this in, it will just darken it up. Look. That becomes our slightly darker colour. And I'm going to put a couple of these strokes in the foreground. So ready here and press. You can see straight away that is a much darker colour. So we'll keep that in the foreground. This is kind of like like a bouncing brush. So I barely touch the paper, press and lift, and you get a nice stroke. And you just interlock them. Doesn't matter if they overlap, you actually want them to overlap. And you just want to build that up as if there's deeper water in the front of your picture. So straight away, you should be getting the feeling now that the front of the picture is nice deep water and moving water as well. Now you do use a lot of colour. And with the pans, the colour is very, very strong. So just be aware that if it looks very dark like that and you're not sure, just take a little of it, put it onto your other tile, and you can always thin it with a little bit of water rather than putting it straight on too dark. Now what I now want to do is, with the flat brush, so this is a slightly diluted colour, so I'm just adjusting the colour with either a little bit more water or a bit more pigment. I just want to put a few more little bits in here to link this section with that. So again, just a zigzag, keeping the brush horizontal. It's really important that you keep the brush horizontal. A couple of these strokes in between. So the more movement you put in at this stage of the painting, the less you have to do afterwards. So a little bit more here, and then we'll leave it for now. So I'm now going to just leave that to dry.